I caught my fiancé inside my sister on the very mattress I had spent 3 years paying off. He smirked, tossing a cruel question at my silence. What are you gonna do? Cry. He expected me to collapse. He had no idea that in that frozen moment, his life had ceased to be a romance and had become a balance sheet in my mind, just waiting for me to hit delete. My name is Harper Cole. I am 28 years old, the copy chief at Northline Story Lab here in Portland, Oregon, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the happiest woman in the Pacific Northwest. The rain was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment on the 12th floor of Willowcrest Towers, turning the city lights into smeared watercolors. It was the kind of storm that usually made me want to curl up with a glass of red wine. But tonight, I was running on adrenaline and caffeine. I should not have been home. My 6 o'clock client meeting had been canceled due to the weather, giving me a rare 2-hour head start on the evening. I balanced a white bakery box containing lemon chiffon wedding cake samples in one hand and a stack of 50 thank you notes in the other. My chest felt tight, a mixture of exhaustion and that electric hum of anxiety that comes the week before your wedding. I was marrying Caleb Monroe, 3 years ago. He was just a bartender with a notebook full of half-finished sci-fi plots. Now, he was the founder of Fable Nest, a storytelling app valued at millions. I had walked every step of that path with him, handling the incorporation papers, the copyright filings, and the financial bleeding while he played the charismatic visionary. I told myself it was fine that my name was nowhere on the letterhead. I told myself men need the feeling of a singular victory to feel like men. I nudged the front door open with my hip, expecting silence. Instead, I heard the low thrum of music coming from the master bedroom. I smiled, shifting the cake box. I assumed Caleb was unwinding with one of those late-night comedy specials he loved. Then I heard a laugh. It was a high, tinkling sound, bright and performative. My blood ran cold. I knew that laugh. I had heard it my entire life across dinner tables and in the back seat of our parents' car. It belonged to Madison, my 24-year-old sister, the fashion influencer who built a career on looking like a wholesome good girl for the internet. I walked down the hallway. The carpet swallowed the sound of my boots. The bedroom door was ajar, spilling a slice of golden light into the dark corridor. The air grew heavy with a sickeningly familiar scent. It was a mix of Madison's vanilla bean perfume and the sandalwood cologne I had bought Caleb for his birthday. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic warning I chose to ignore as I pushed the door open. They were there. On the bed, the very bed I had spent 3 years paying off in monthly installments. I did not see nudity in the clinical sense. I saw a chaotic blur of skin and frantic movement. I saw Madison's favorite silk blouse tangled in the sheets. I saw Caleb's hands I had held while he cried over rejected pitches, now gripping my sister's waist. The room went silent. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the penthouse. Madison scrambled back, her eyes wide and terrified, pulling the duvet up to her chin. Caleb did not scramble. He just stopped. He reached over and grabbed his discarded dress shirt, covering his lap with a slow, almost insolent motion. He looked at the ruin on the floor. He waited for the sob to rip through my chest. I waited for the collapse. "Why?" I whispered. The word felt like it was made of glass in my throat. Caleb ran a hand through his messy hair and let out a sharp, incredulous huff of laughter. He looked me up and down, taking in my wet raincoat and the bakery box. "What are you gonna do?" "Cry?" he asked. His tone was mocking, light and cruel, the way a bully speaks to a child on a playground. I didn't mean for this to happen," Madison squeaked, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. Harper." She was clutching his arm. She was clutching the arm of my fiancé while lying in my bed. My fingers went numb. The white bakery box slipped from my grip and hit the hardwood floor with a wet thud. The cardboard burst open, and the lemon chiffon cake exploded, sending smears of white frosting across the polished wood and the edge of the expensive Persian rug. I looked at the ruin on the floor. I waited for the sob to rip through my chest. I waited for the collapse, but it never came. Instead, a sensation like ice water flooded the base of my skull. It was a sudden, absolute zero. It felt as though someone had reached into the fuse box of my soul and simply flipped the main breaker to the off position. The pain was there, distant and dull, but it was walled off behind a sheet of bulletproof glass. "Okay," I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly steady. I took a step back. I reached for the door handle. "Wait, seriously," Caleb called out, his voice chasing me into the hallway. "You're just walking away." "You really are a robot, Harper. No wonder I got bored." I closed the door on his voice. I closed the door on my sister. I walked into the kitchen, my movements mechanical. I did not turn on the lights. The glow from the refrigerator was enough as I yanked the door open. I stared at the papers taped to the stainless steel. The wedding timeline, the list of vendors, the contact information for the investors coming to the ceremony. My eyes scanned the list. I did not see a celebration anymore. I saw a spreadsheet. I saw liabilities and assets. I saw intellectual property rights and breach of contract clauses. The tears did not come, but the numbers did. They began to scroll through my mind, crisp and black and white, replacing the heartbeat that had just shattered in my chest. I reached for a bottle of water, my hand trembling not from sorrow, but from a cold, calculating rage. I was not going to be the weeping bride. I was going to be the auditor, and I was about to close their account for good. The morning sun hit the silk of my wedding dress hanging on the living room wall, turning the ivory fabric into a ghostly silhouette. I had slept on the sofa, curled up under a throw blanket, still wearing my raincoat. On the floor, the smear of lemon chiffon cake had dried into a crusty, yellowish scab on the hardwood. I stared at it for a long time. My body felt heavy, vibrating with a strange numbness, as if my nerves were insulated by cotton wool. It was hard to believe the scene from the night before was real, but the silence in the apartment was loud enough to confirm it. My phone, which I had tossed onto the coffee table, began to buzz with the relentless persistence of a morning alarm. I picked it up. Madison had sent a text that was long enough to be a novel. It was a chaotic stream of consciousness about how she had been drunk, how she was confused, and how, I have always looked up to Caleb. The ending made my stomach churn. "We can talk about this. Harper, please don't let the family fall apart a week before the wedding. It would kill Mom." It was a masterpiece of manipulation, half cowardice and half victimhood. Caleb's message was shorter. It arrived 3 minutes later. "Last night was a mistake. I still love you, but you are being paranoid and controlling, so do not blow this up. Think about the deal with Quasar Media next week. If you sabotage this, the whole company dies." I put the phone down. I did not reply. Instead, my mind drifted back 3 years. I remembered the check for $50,000, the life insurance payout from when my mother passed. I remembered sitting at our old kitchen table, sketching out the business plan for Fable Nest while Caleb mixed drinks at the dive bar down the street. I remembered filing the initial copyright for the code in his name alone. "It looks better for investors if there is a singular visionary," I had told him. Men need that feeling of winning. I had believed that love did not require a paper trail. I pulled my laptop onto my lap and logged into the cloud drive. My fingers moved with the muscle memory of a copy chief, not a fiancé. I opened the legal folder. I opened the incorporation documents. I opened the patent filings. Every single document listed Caleb Monroe as the sole founder and proprietor. My name appeared only on independent contractor agreements. I was listed as a strategic consultant with a fixed monthly stipend. I felt a surge of bile in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I dug deeper. I found the admin access logs. Madison had been logging in. She had been helping edit pitch decks. I opened his archived direct messages. I scrolled back 6 months. Harper is just so serious all the time. Madison had written in late May. She doesn't get how men think. At least you get me, Caleb had replied. I closed the window before I could throw the laptop across the room. I logged into our joint bank account, or rather, the account I managed. I pulled up the statement from last month. There was a personal loan I had taken out in my name for $60,000. Caleb had begged me for it, claiming it was a bridge loan for tax optimization that he would pay back before the fiscal year ended. I looked at the transaction history. The money had not gone to the IRS. $35,000 to Tesla Motors. $15,000 to a high-end furniture boutique in the Pearl District, shipped to the address of the East Bank Creative Hub. He had bought a car and decorated his new office with the debt that was tied to my credit score. I was not a partner. I was a wallet with a pulse. My hand hovered over the contact for our wedding planner. One call. And I could cancel the flowers, the venue, the catering. I could burn it all down right now. But then another email notification popped up in the corner of my screen. It was from the executive assistant at Quasar Media, confirming attendance for Ms. Lena Ortiz and associate for the nuptials at Silver Hollow Estate. Ms. Ortiz is looking forward to discussing the $2 million Series A capitalization informally during the reception. I froze. $2 million. If I canceled the wedding, I would be the hysterical ex-fiancé who ruined a business deal. I would be the woman who cried. But if I let the wedding happen, if I let them walk into that venue thinking they had won the timeline on the fridge, suddenly looked less like a schedule and more like a trap. I had the investors. I had the family. I had the venue. I deleted the draft text I had started typing to my mother. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to P. Hello. A groggy voice answered on the second ring. Jonah, I said. My voice was raspy, but clear. I need you to wake up. I need a lawyer. Not the nice kind. Harper. Jonah Price paused, the sleep leaving his voice instantly. It is 7 a.m. on a Saturday. What happened? I need to know exactly how much damage I can do with a paper trail and a microphone, I said. And I need you to meet me in an hour. The elevators at Roosevelt Plaza were mirrored, forcing me to look at myself before I walked into Northline's Story Lab. I looked normal. My blazer was crisp, my eyeliner was sharp, and the dark circles under my eyes were concealed under layers of expensive concealer. I stepped onto the open-plan floor, a hive of clicking keyboards and murmuring voices. Harper Sarah, our social media manager, popped up from behind her dual monitors. Oh my God, have you approved the photo booth sponsor yet? They need the vector file for the logo by noon. And are we settling on Monroe? Ever after it is polling really well. I felt a phantom hand squeeze my throat. I forced a smile that felt like it was stapled to my face. I will check the proofs after my morning stand-up, I said. My voice sounded calm. It was amazing how easy it was to lie when your entire reality had already collapsed. I bypassed my desk and ducked into one of the soundproof phone booths we used for client calls. I dialed Jonah. Talk to me, I said, skipping the pleasantries. I pulled the public filings, Jonah said, his voice tinny through the receiver. Harper, it is tight. On paper. Fable Nest is 100% his. The LLC, the trademarks, the initial domain registration. He was thorough. I did the paperwork, I said, staring at the acoustic foam on the wall. I was thorough. I just thought I was building a partnership, not digging my own grave. Jonah sighed. Okay, here is the reality. Unless we can prove you are a hidden co-founder, meaning we need original source files, emails where he explicitly acknowledges your equity, or proof that your personal funds were used directly for operating costs, we are fighting uphill. So, I have to ask, do you want to sue for a settlement, or do you want to bury this and start over? I closed my eyes. I saw Caleb's face. I saw the way he had looked at me in the bedroom, like I was an inconvenience. I don't want a settlement, I said quietly. I want him to lose everything he built using me. Then we need ammunition, Jonah said. Original code, investor decks, chat logs. Anything that links your money to his assets. I am on it, I said, and hung up. At noon, I walked into the East Bank Creative Hub. Fable Nest rented a glass-walled corner office in the trendy co-working space. I carried a box of donuts, playing the role of the supportive fiancé perfectly. The team was there, a dozen 20-somethings in hoodies who looked up when I entered. Future Mrs. Monroe. The lead developer cheered, reaching for a maple bar. We heard about the Quasar interest. Congrats. Thanks, guys, I said, my smile tight. Is Caleb in? He is out grabbing lunch with a vendor. Go on in. I walked into Caleb's office and shut the door. I did not sit down. I went straight to his desktop. I knew his password. It was my birthday. The irony stung, but I ignored it. I plugged in my external hard drive. I worked with surgical precision. I dragged the ghost copies of the original code folders onto my drive. I found the legal folder. I found the HR subfolder. Inside, there was a PDF titled Consulting Agreement, M. Cole. I opened it. My breath hitched. It was a contract for Madison, $2,000 a month for strategic branding services, with a kicker clause for 5,000 shares of common stock upon the closing of the Series A round with Quasar Media. He was paying my sister to sleep with him, and he was using company equity to do it. Harper. I froze. Caleb was standing in the doorway, holding a salad bowl. He did not look suspicious. He looked annoyed. "What are you doing here?" he asked, setting the bowl down. "Are you checking up on me?" "Look, if you are still mad about the other night." "Mad?" I repeated, ejecting the drive and sliding it into my purse. "It was a mistake. Harper," he said, walking over and putting his hands on my shoulders. I was drunk. She was there. It meant nothing. "You are blowing this out of proportion. You know how stressed I have been about the Quasar deal." He smiled, that boyish, charming smile that had worked on me for 3 years. He picked up a document from his desk. "Look at this term sheet," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Once this signs next week, we are done struggling." I put a deposit down on that house in Lake Alder Vista, the one with the dock. Imagine it, Harper, you, me, and, well, our family. We are going to be set for life. He said family, and I felt a physical wave of nausea. He was not talking about a home. He was pitching me a lifestyle to keep me quiet. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I did not see the man I loved. I saw a liability. I saw a fraud. "Lake Alder Vista sounds expensive," I said flatly. "We can afford it," he said, kissing my forehead. "Now go back to work. I have to prep for the board meeting, and stop worrying. What are you going to do? Stay mad forever." I walked out of the building. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the theft. I drove straight to a small coffee shop on 4th Avenue where Jonah was waiting in a back booth. I sat down and slid the hard drive across the table. It made a heavy metallic sound against the wood. "I got the original code metadata," I said. "I got the investor emails where he claims he bootstrapped the funding alone, and I got a consulting contract he signed with Madison for equity." Jonah picked up the drive. He looked at me, his eyebrows raising as he processed the weight of what I had just handed him. He let out a low, impressed whistle. "If this drive contains what I think it does," Jonah said, leaning in, "then you didn't just walk into his office this morning, Harper. You walked into a war zone." The drive to Maple Ridge felt like crossing into a different timeline. The suburban streets were lined with manicured lawns and American flags drooping in the evening calm. My parents' house, a sprawling split level with cedar siding, glowed with warm yellow light. The smell of pot roast and rosemary hit me the moment I stepped onto the porch, a scent that used to mean safety, but now just smelled like a lie. Madison was already there. She was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a glass of white wine. She looked infuriatingly innocent. She wore a high-necked cream sweater and had her hair pulled back in a loose, messy bun, the kind that takes 40 minutes to perfect. "Harper." Mom beamed, rushing over to hug me. She smelled of hairspray and expensive vanilla candles. "Did you see Madison's post this morning? She hit 500,000 followers. And oh, honey, tell me again about the guest list. Your father is so proud that we have venture capitalists coming to our backyard." I smiled, the muscles in my face aching. "It is going to be a great networking opportunity for Caleb." "Mom." While Mom bustled off to check the roast, Madison slid off her stool and cornered me near the pantry. Her eyes darted around the room before locking onto mine. "Harper," she whispered, leaning in close. "Don't make a scene tonight. Please, me and Caleb. We are done. It is over. This wedding is yours. Just pretend you don't know." The audacity took my breath away. She was not asking for forgiveness. She was negotiating a ceasefire so she wouldn't look bad. I looked at her, really looked at her. Growing up, Madison had always been the cute one, the one who got away with breaking vases because she cried so prettily. I was the eldest. I was the one who cleaned up the glass. I was the one who was expected to be mature. "You slept with my fiancé," I said, my voice low and flat. "You are always so busy," Madison hissed, her face flushing pink. "You only talk about KPIs and contracts. Caleb needs someone who knows how to have fun." I was just filling the space you left empty." It was a direct hit. For 3 years, I had poured every ounce of my energy into building Fable Nest, sacrificing dates, vacations, and sleep so Caleb could play the genius founder. And now, my own sister was telling me that my sacrifice was the reason she had betrayed me. I could have screamed. I could have thrown my glass of wine in her face, but the spreadsheet in my head flashed a warning. Not yet. Too emotional. High risk of failure. "Okay," I said quietly. "I understand." Madison's shoulders sagged in relief. She looked almost triumphant. She reached out and hugged me, a quick, performative squeeze. "I knew you would be reasonable. We are sisters, right?" "Right," I said. We moved to the dining room. Caleb arrived 20 minutes late, breathless and flushed, looking every inch the stressed but successful entrepreneur. "So sorry, Mrs. Cole," he said, kissing my mother's cheek. "I missed family dinner last night prepping for your daughter's future. The Quasar deal is a beast." "Oh, Caleb, don't apologize," my father boomed, clapping him on the back. "Hard work pays off. We are just so proud to have a driven young man in the family." They sat down, laughing and passing the potatoes, oblivious to the fact that the man at the head of the table was a fraud. I watched Caleb pour wine for everyone. He caught my eye and winked, confident that he had managed the situation. "Speaking of hard work," I said, cutting into my roast beef. "Caleb, did you get a chance to transfer that 60,000 back to my account? The bank called me today about the interest rate." The table went quiet. Caleb froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. 60,000, my father asked, frowning. "That is a lot of money, Harper." "It was for tax optimization." "Right, honey," Caleb said quickly, his smile faltering for a microsecond before returning at full wattage. "I told you, once the Series A closes next week, we are clearing all personal debts." "But why is the debt in Harper's name if it is for the company?" my mother asked, confused. "Because Harper has the better credit score," Madison chirped up, jumping to his defense. "God, Harper, why do you have to bring up money at dinner? Look at the ring he bought you. Isn't it enough that he is building an empire for you?" Right, Caleb said, visibly relaxing. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I am doing this for us, babe. Don't be so transactional. I pulled my hand away slowly. I looked at my parents. They were nodding along with Madison. If I told them the truth right now that he was cheating, that he was stealing, Madison would cry. Caleb would spin a story about my jealousy and control issues, and they would probably believe them. They wanted the fairy tale too much to see the rot. I needed more than a confession. I needed a verdict. Later that night, I stood alone on the back porch. The air was crisp and smelled of rain. Madison had strung fairy lights along the railing earlier for a vlog she was filming titled My Sister's Wedding Journey. They twinkled in the darkness, mocking me with their cheerfulness. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Jonah. Attached audio recorder JA setup demo, MP3. This app runs in the background. High sensitivity mic. Can pick up a whisper from across a room. Stitch it into the lining of your dress. I pressed play. A burst of static was followed by Jonah's voice, crystal clear. Testing. 1, 2. If this works, you will catch a pin drop. I looked at the dark yard. A small, cold smile touched my lips. It wasn't the smile of a bride. It was the smile of a hunter who had just realized the wind was blowing in her favor. 3 days before the wedding, the HR director at Northline called me into her office. She didn't offer me coffee. She didn't make eye contact. She just slid a printed email across the desk. Harper, we received an anonymous complaint this morning, she said, her voice tight. It alleges a history of domestic instability. Specifically, an incident in high school involving physical violence against your sister. I stared at the paper. It was a fabrication, a detailed lie about me grabbing Madison by the hair and slamming her head into a wall. It never happened. But the detail, the mention of the blue hallway in our old house made it sound terrifyingly real. This is a lie, I said, my voice steady. We are investigating, she interrupted. But given the sensitive nature of our pending contract with Fable Nest and Caleb's prominent role, we think it is best if you take paid administrative leave, just until after the wedding. We don't want any optics issues. I understood immediately. I wasn't being investigated. I was being quarantined. They were protecting the deal with Caleb by silencing the liability me. I walked out of the building with my box of personal items, feeling the eyes of my colleagues burning into my back. My phone buzzed. A notification from TikTok. Madison had posted a new video. Story time dealing with a toxic sibling during my sister's wedding week. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. She described a controlling, obsessive sister who hates my boyfriend for no reason and throws tantrums when she isn't the center of attention. The comments were a landslide of support. OMG, cut her off. Bestie, why are older sisters always so jealous? I hope she doesn't ruin your speech. She was building a narrative. If I canceled the wedding now, I would just be the crazy sister who finally snapped. Caleb would be the saint who put up with me. Do not sue for defamation, Jonah told me over the phone. Not yet. It looks desperate. Let them dig the hole. The more they lie, the harder they fall when the truth comes out. I am not suing, I said, typing furiously on my laptop. I am compiling. I created a Proton Mail account TruthSeeker88. I drafted an email to the legal team at Quasar Media. I attached the bank statements showing the personal loan used for business expenses without disclosure. I attached the screenshots from the Fable Nest internal Slack channel where Caleb bragged about creative accounting to dodge payroll taxes. Then I called Avery Lang. Expose Tech was a niche but vicious tech journalism site, and Avery was their pit bull. You are telling me the golden boy of Portland Tech is running a shell game funded by his fiancé's dead mom's insurance? Avery asked, her voice crackling with interest. And he is sleeping with her sister, whom he put on the payroll for equity. I added, I have the contracts. I have the receipts. I will give you everything on the wedding day. Exclusive, exclusive. My phone was silent for the rest of the day. The bridesmaids group chat had gone dead. I saw them posting photos of a pre-wedding brunch on Instagram that I wasn't invited to. They believed the story. They thought I was having a breakdown. I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by tech. I tested the tiny button camera I would pin into the center of my bridal bouquet. I synced the audio recording app on my phone to upload directly to a cloud server. I loaded the backup slides onto a USB drive shaped like a lipstick tube. Jonah walked me through the final step. Okay, the nuclear option is set. You press the side button on your Apple Watch 3 times. It triggers a script that sends the scheduled emails to Quasar, Avery, Northline HR, and the IRS tip line simultaneously. I put the watch on. It felt heavy on my wrist. That night, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the dark bedroom. I was wearing my wedding dress. The silk felt cool against my skin. In the shadows, I looked like the perfect bride. But inside, I felt like a bomb technician. No, I whispered to my reflection. I am not gonna cry. I am gonna calculate. I took a breath and imagined the timeline. Saturday, 2 p.m., the vows, the question, the answer, and then the detonation. The email from Quasar Media arrived at 8 in the morning with the subject line attendance confirmation, VP strategy. It was brief and terrifyingly polite. They were sending Lena Ortiz, their vice president of investment, to the wedding. The email stated she was eager to observe the team dynamic and the personal network supporting the Fable Nest vision. It was code. They were coming to see if Caleb was a safe bet or a liability. I was in the hallway of our apartment, putting on my coat to go to the bank, when I heard Caleb's voice coming from the study. The door was cracked. He was on speakerphone. She will sign it, Maddie, Caleb said, his voice confident. Once we are married, I will convince her that moving the $60,000 debt to her personal liability is better for the company's valuation. She won't fight me on the honeymoon. She is such a pushover. Madison's voice crackled through the phone, followed by a giggle. She always wants to keep the peace. You know she would rather die than make things awkward. I stood frozen, my hand gripping my car keys until my knuckles turned white. They were banking on my silence. They were betting on my love for order over my self-respect. I drove straight to the bank. I needed to check everything. When the banker pulled up the deed to the property at Seabrook Cove, the blood drained from my face. Seabrook Cove was a small, weathered cottage on the coast that my mother had left to Madison and me. It was the only thing we had left of her. There is a lien on the property, the banker said, turning the monitor so I could see. It was used as collateral for a $40,000 bridge loan issued to Fable Nest Inc. 3 months ago. I stared at the document on the screen. There, at the bottom, was my signature, Harper Cole. But the loop on the H was wrong. It was identical to the signature on my driver's license from 5 years ago. He had traced it. I walked out to the parking lot and called Jonah. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. He forged my signature, I said into the receiver. He mortgaged my mother's house without telling me. That is fraud, Harper, Jonah said, his voice dropping an octave. That is a felony. If we can prove he did it, he goes to prison. But we need the original document. I will get it, I said. I tried to talk to my mother that afternoon. I went to her house, sitting in the kitchen where she was arranging centerpieces. I didn't tell her about the affair. I tested the waters with the money. Mom, I said carefully, I think Caleb might be reckless with finances. I found some loans I didn't know about. Mom stopped cutting the stems of the white roses. She looked at me with a fearful, pleading expression. Harper, please, don't destroy everything over money. You are almost 30. You don't want to be alone because you were too rigid about a bank account. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. She knew, somewhere deep down, she knew he was a user, but she feared my spinsterhood more than his theft. My father was even worse. He met me on the porch, a scotch in his hand. Caleb is the only stable man you have ever brought home, he said, looking out at the lawn. He is building something. Don't let your history with Madison cloud your judgment. I know you were always jealous of how easy things came to her, but don't take it out on him. He patted my shoulder and walked back inside. That was the moment the last hesitation died. They thought I was jealous. They thought I was petty. If I'd just exposed the affair, they would say I was vindictive. I had to destroy his business ethics. I had to make him radioactive to the one thing he loved more than himself, his money. We should sue now, Jonah said when I called him back. Stop the wedding. No, I said. The wedding is the stage. It is the only time everyone will be in one room. Quasar, the HR department, my parents. If I do it in a courtroom, it gets buried in paperwork. If I do it at the altar, it becomes a headline. I spent the next day rearranging the seating chart. I moved the Quasar representatives to table 4, directly next to the HR director from Northline. I placed my parents right behind them. I called the AV company and insisted on a special slideshow to be played before the vows. I need to test the audio connection for a tribute video. I told the DJ, it has to be loud, crystal clear. On the evening of the rehearsal, I stood alone on the lawn of Silver Hollow Estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the rows of white chairs. Workers were draping floral garlands over the gazebo. It was breathtakingly beautiful. I imagined Caleb standing there, smiling his winning smile. I imagined Madison in her maid of honor dress, thinking she had won. I looked at the empty altar. I didn't feel sad. I felt a strange, icy calm. I wasn't a bride anymore. I was the executioner, and the guillotine was sharp. The morning light at Silver Hollow Estate was unforgiving. It flooded the bridal suite, illuminating every dust mote and every layer of foundation being spackled onto my face by a woman I had met only 3 hours ago. The room was a chaotic hive of pink silk robes, champagne flutes, and frantic bridesmaids. In the center of it all was Madison. She was playing the role of the devoted maid of honor with an intensity that bordered on manic. She fluffed my train, adjusted my veil, and handed me water with a straw so I would not smudge my lipstick. She did everything except look me in the eye. She leaned in close to pin a stray curl behind my ear. Her hands were cold. "I really am happy for you, Harper," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I cut things off with Caleb. It is done. Today is about you." It was a smooth lie, polished and ready for display. I looked at her reflection in the vanity mirror. I saw the fear behind the heavy mascara. "Good," I said, my smile not reaching my eyes. "I am happy for you too, Madison." It was a generic response, but to me, it sounded like the reading of a sentence before the gavel drops. I turned away to check my accessories. I fastened my pearl earrings and then slipped my Apple Watch onto my left wrist. It clashed slightly with the vintage lace, but I did not care. Next, I reached into the hidden pocket I had sewn into the layers of my tulle skirt and checked my phone. The recording app was open, the sensitivity set to high. My phone buzzed against my palm. A text from Jonah. I am at the booth. "Slides are loaded. Audio check is green. Avery Lang is seated with her photographer in row 3. It is showtime." The door creaked open, and my father stepped in. He looked older in his tuxedo, his eyes rimmed with red. The room hushed as the bridesmaids stepped back to give us a moment. "You look beautiful, Bean," he said, using his childhood nickname for me. He took my hands. "I am so proud. Finally, I can hand you over to a man who is worthy of you, a man who can take care of things." I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and sharp. He meant it. He truly believed Caleb was the prize. "Thank you, Dad," I choked out. The definition of worthy was about to be rewritten in front of 300 people, 10 minutes before the procession. The coordinator cleared the room for my final touch-ups. As soon as the door clicked shut, it opened again. Caleb slipped inside. He looked dashing in his custom navy suit, the very image of the successful tech mogul. He locked the door and crossed the room in 2 strides, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. "Harper," he murmured into my neck. "You look incredible." I stood rigid. "Listen," he continued, his voice dropping to a persuasive purr, "about the other night. Let's just leave it in the past. I chose you. Madison was just a slip, a moment of stupidity. We are building a dynasty. You and me." I turned slowly in his arms to face him. I reached into my pocket and silently tapped the record button on my phone. "Caleb," I asked softly, "if I put every dollar I gave you, every line of code I wrote, and every contract I reviewed into a spreadsheet and took it away, what do you think would be left of you?" Caleb's smile faltered. A flash of genuine irritation crossed his face. He laughed, a short, sharp bark. "I don't need a spreadsheet to exist. Harper, I have the talent. I am the visionary. You." He sneered, leaning closer. "Without me, you are just a copywriter with a mortgage. What are you gonna do? Cry." There it was, the reprise. I felt the phone vibrate against my thigh, capturing every syllable of his arrogance. I tilted my head, pretending to consider his question. "No," I said calmly. "I think today I will try something else." He frowned, not understanding. He kissed my forehead dismissively. "You are weird when you are nervous. I will see you at the altar." He left. The ceremony began, the music swelled, a string quartet playing a haunting version of a pop song. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm. The garden was a blur of white flowers and expectant faces. I saw my mother dabbing her eyes. I saw the investors from Quasar Media looking bored but attentive. I saw the HR director from Northline checking her watch. To them, I was a blushing bride walking toward her happy ending. To me, the white noise of the crowd was just static before the broadcast. I locked eyes with Caleb waiting under the floral arch. He looked triumphant. I reached the altar. My father kissed my cheek and sat down. I handed my bouquet to Madison. Her hands were shaking so hard the flowers trembled. The vicar began the service. He spoke about love, trust, and fidelity. I tuned him out until he reached the part that everyone usually ignored. "If anyone here can show just cause why these two may not be lawfully joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The silence that followed was heavy. I looked past Caleb's shoulder. I saw Jonah standing behind the DJ booth. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. I saw Avery Lang uncap her pen. The vicar turned to me with a benevolent smile. "Harper, do you take this man to be your wedded husband? To live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony?" I took a deep breath. The air smelled of sea salt and betrayal. I looked straight into Caleb's eyes. I knew the answer I was about to give was not for the vicar. It was for the last 3 years of my life. Instead of saying, "I do," I leaned into the small lapel microphone clipped to my bodice. The sound of my breath amplified across the garden, cutting through the ambient string music like a knife. "Before I answer that," I said, my voice steady and cold, "I think I owe everyone here a few numbers. And a few truths." The cello player stopped abruptly, the bow screeching against the strings. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The vicar blinked, looking from me to the congregation in confusion. "Harper, not now," Caleb hissed, his face draining of color. He tried to grab my hand, his grip painful. "You are having a panic attack. Let's go inside." I ripped my hand away from his. I looked over his shoulder and nodded at the DJ booth. "Jonah," I said, "hit it." The decorative lights inside the reception tent dimmed, and the massive projection screen behind the altar intended for a sentimental montage of our childhood photos flickered to life. A collective gasp rippled through the guests as the first slide appeared. It was a timeline titled Fable Nest, The Story, Verstatter, The Paper Trail. 3 years ago, Caleb told you he built his company from scratch, I said, addressing the crowd like I was leading a shareholder meeting. The truth is, he built it on $50,000 of my mother's life insurance payout. He told you he wrote the code. Here is the email from the original repository showing I wrote the core algorithm while he was asleep. I clicked a button on a small remote concealed in my bouquet. A screenshot of an email from Caleb appeared. The text was massive. You are the co-founder, Harper. Without you, I am nothing. But the investors want a male CEO. This is private company business. Caleb shouted, lunging for the microphone stand. This is not the place. I sidestepped him. Play audio file 1, I commanded. Caleb's voice boomed through the high-quality speakers, unmistakable and arrogant. I used the loan in your name to dodge the tax man. As long as the IRS doesn't dig, we are fine. The crowd began to murmur, a sound like a rising swarm of bees. I saw the HR director from Northline sit up straighter. Next slide, I said. A high-resolution scan of a mortgage document filled the screen. This is the deed to the cottage at Seabrook Cove, I said, my eyes locking on my parents. The only property my mother left to Madison and me. I never signed this document. But, as you can see, someone traced my signature to use our family home as a gambling chip for his business expansion. Harper, stop! Madison cried out from beside me. She looked terrifyingly pale. There has to be a mistake. The bank made a mistake. Really? I asked. Next slide. Ooh, a chat log from WhatsApp appeared. It was dated 3 months ago. Caleb, I used the house as collateral. Your sister will never know. Madison. Just make sure we don't lose it. She loves that place. My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She turned to Madison, her eyes wide with horror. My father stood up, his face purple, looking at the screen as if it were a burning building. And finally, I said, for those wondering why a bride would do this. I pressed the play button on my phone one last time. What are you gonna do? Cry. Caleb's voice sneered from the speakers. It was the recording from the bridal suite, less than 30 minutes ago. Then, a video played. It was only 3 seconds long. It was dark, shot from a hallway, showing a bedroom door ajar. But the lighting was clear enough to show 2 silhouettes on the bed, and the audio was clear enough to hear Madison moaning Caleb's name. The silence in the garden was no longer heavy. It was dead. It was the vacuum of space. I looked at the crowd. Some people were looking away in secondhand embarrassment. Others were staring at Caleb with open disgust. Lena Ortiz from Quasar Media was not looking at the screen. She was looking at her phone, reading the email that had just hit her inbox along with the inboxes of the IRS and the Northline Ethics Board. You are crazy, Caleb screamed, his composure finally shattering. He looked wild, sweat beading on his forehead. This is fake. It is a deep fake. She fabricated all of it because she is jealous. He spun around to face my parents. Tell them she has been unstable. Mark, Linda, say something. My father did not speak. He stood like a statue, staring at the man he had called son 10 minutes ago. My mother buried her face in her hands, refusing to look at him. In the 3rd row, Avery Lang stood up. The movement drew everyone's eyes. She held up her press badge, the laminate catching the afternoon sun. Caleb Monroe, she called out, her voice projecting clearly without a microphone. I have a few questions about how you treat your female co-founders and your tax filings. Do you want to answer on the record now, or should I just wait for the article to publish at the DJ booth? Jonah looked at his phone and then gave me a thumbs up. He mouthed the words, "Deal dead." Caleb looked around the garden, searching for an ally, for a way out. But the beautiful venue had become a courtroom, and the verdict was already written on everyone's faces. Silver Hollow became a shipwreck in less than 20 minutes. The guests fled as if the open bar had been poisoned. scrambling to their cars to avoid the awkwardness of a destroyed family. I did not watch them go. I was in the small administrative office off the main hall, watching my family disintegrate. Madison was sobbing, a theatrical, heaving display that usually worked on our parents. She tried to grab my mother's hand, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. "Mom, please, she is lying. She is jealous because Caleb chose me," Madison wailed. My mother pulled her hand away. It was a sharp, violent motion I had never seen her make before. She looked at Madison, her face stripped of the softness that had defined her for decades. "Stop it," my mother said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. I saw the video. "Madison, I heard the audio. Do not lie to me. How long have you been sleeping with your sister's fiancé?" Madison froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. My father turned away, staring at the wall, unable to look at either of his daughters. I left them to their wreckage. I had a meeting to attend. In the venue's conference room, Jonah and I sat across from Lena Ortiz and the general counsel for Quasar Media. I slid the black hard drive across the mahogany table. "This drive contains the original source code metadata proving my authorship," I said, my voice clinical. "It also contains the bank records showing that the seed capital came from my personal account, not Caleb's savings. And, of course, the forged mortgage documents." Lena Ortiz did not touch the drive. She looked at her lawyer, then back at me. "Quasar is formally withdrawing our offer," Lena said. "We do not invest in fraud. Furthermore, given that Mr. Monroe attempted to solicit funds based on falsified intellectual property ownership, we are legally obligated to report this to the State Securities Commission. Fable Nest is radioactive." By the time I drove back to the city, my phone was lighting up with emails from Northline Story Lab. The HR director had sent a formal apology, stating that my administrative leave was rescinded and that they were opening a whistleblower protection file for me. They wanted me back. They knew where the power had shifted. Jonah wasted no time. He filed a civil suit the next morning. We were not just asking for damages. We were asking for a constructive trust over Fable Nest, arguing that the company was an asset acquired through the misappropriation of my funds and labor. We filed an emergency motion to freeze Caleb's assets to prevent capital flight. The court of public opinion moved faster than the legal system. 24 hours after the wedding, Avery Lang published her article. The headline screamed from every LinkedIn feed in Portland. Golden Boy of Storytech built his empire on his dead fiancé's insurance money. It went viral instantly. The tech world loves a hero, but they love a villain's downfall even more. Madison tried to fight back. She posted a tearful video on TikTok, captioned, "There are two sides to every story," where she claimed our family dynamic was complicated and asked for empathy. It was a fatal miscalculation. The internet detectives dug up her old videos mocking me, cross-referencing them with the evidence I had released. The comment section turned into a slaughterhouse. By noon, 3 clothing brands had issued public statements announcing they were pausing their partnerships with her. Caleb went dark. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he was holed up in his apartment at Northline Heights, drinking expensive scotch and screaming at his lawyers. He still believed he could talk his way out of it. He thought this was a breakup. He did not understand that this was a liquidation. 1 week later, the hammer fell. A judge granted our preliminary injunction. Caleb's personal accounts were frozen. The corporate accounts of Fable Nest were placed under court-appointed oversight, and the state prosecutor's office sent a formal letter inviting Caleb Monroe in for questioning regarding bank fraud and forgery. The consequences trickled down to the family. With her influencer income drying up and our parents refusing to enable her any longer, Madison was forced to move out of her luxury studio. She had to rent a room in a shared house on the outskirts of the city. For the first time in her life, she was facing a bill she could not cry her way out of. I walked out of the county courthouse after the hearing, blinking against the flash of cameras. A reporter from the local news thrust a microphone in my face. "Ms. Cole, Is this revenge? Are you trying to destroy your ex-fiancé because of the affair? I stopped. I looked directly into the camera lens. I am not taking revenge, I said calmly. I am just reclaiming what was mine. I am letting the truth do the rest. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. I felt a grim satisfaction, but the ledger was not balanced yet. There was one line item remaining: the house at Seabrook Cove. And I knew Caleb, desperate and cornered, would try one last gambit to save himself. I was counting on it. Caleb was running out of time and options. Desperate to flee the state before the tax authorities and the fraud investigators could close the net, he decided to play his final card. He arranged a secret sale of the cottage at Seabrook Cove to a shady real estate developer who paid in cash and did not ask too many questions about titles. Even though the signature on the deed had been exposed as a forgery, Caleb arrogantly believed he could fast-talk his way through one last transaction. Jonah called me at dawn. He had a contact in the county clerk's network who flagged a rush request for a notary appointment at a small office in town. We both knew this was it. It was the final chance to stop him not just legally, but emotionally. The notary office was a small, weathered building that smelled of damp wood and old paper. Outside, a light drizzle fell from a gray sky, turning the coastal road into a slick mirror. I sat in a high-backed leather chair in the corner, obscured by the shadows. Jonah sat beside me, and two plainclothes officers from the State Financial Crimes Division stood by the window. The bell above the door chimed. Caleb walked in, shaking a wet umbrella. He looked exhausted. His designer suit was rumpled, and he had dark hollows under his eyes, but he still carried himself with that maddening, unearned confidence. A man in a cheap trench coat, the buyer, followed him. "I am in a hurry," Caleb told the notary, slamming a folder onto the counter. "Let's get this signed. I don't think you will be signing anything today." "Caleb," I said, standing up. Caleb spun around. The color drained from his face when he saw me, then Jonah, then the officers. "Harper," he breathed, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" "The notary needs to verify the seller's authority," Jonah said calmly. "And since the deed is based on a forgery, you have none." I stepped forward and placed a certified forensic document analysis on the counter. "This confirms that the signature on the mortgage authorization is a trace, not an original. You don't own this house. Caleb, you never did." The officers stepped forward, one of them pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Caleb Monroe, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of bank fraud, forgery, and grand larceny." Caleb laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. He backed away, holding his hands up. "This is ridiculous. I didn't forge anything. It was probably Madison. She is the one who handles the personal files. I had no idea." He was doing it again. He was throwing another woman in front of the bus to save himself. I pulled out my phone. I didn't need a projector this time. I just turned the volume up to the maximum. "Play audio file 3, I said to the quiet room. Caleb's recorded voice filled the space. "I used the house at Seabrook as collateral. Your sister will never know." "It is an easy loophole." The buyer in the trench coat turned and walked out the door without a word. Caleb looked at the empty doorway, then at the officers closing in on him. As the cold steel clicked around his wrists, his composure snapped. He began to struggle, his face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. "You destroyed my life just because I slept with your sister," he screamed, spitting the words at me. "You are sick, Harper. You are actually sick." He still didn't get it. He thought this was a crime of passion. He thought this was about a broken heart. He thought he was the victim of a scorned woman, not the architect of his own criminal downfall. I walked until I was inches from his face. I looked him in the eye, searching for the man I had loved for 3 years, but I found only a stranger. "You destroyed your own life, Caleb," I said softly, my voice steady enough for everyone to hear. I just stopped you from spending other people's lives to fund it. You asked me what I was going to do. This is the answer. The officers let him out into the rain. He twisted his head back, looking for Madison, looking for my parents, looking for anyone who would buy his story. But there was no one. Just Jonah, the notary, the police, and me. For the first time, the visionary founder of Fable Nest looked small. He was just a man in handcuffs standing on a wet porch. Once the police cruiser disappeared around the bend, the notary looked at us nervously. I suppose the sale is canceled. The sale is canceled, I confirmed, but I have one document to sign. I pulled a prepared deed from my bag, right there on the counter. I signed over Madison's 50% share of the property to a small local charity named after our mother. The clause was specific Madison could live in the house, but only if she served on the board of the charity and the house was never used for commercial purposes. It was not forgiveness, but it was not cruelty either. It was a chance for her to grow up. I walked out onto the porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the air smelling of salt and wet pine. I watched the empty road where Caleb had been taken away. I did not smile. I did not feel a surge of triumph. I just felt a quiet, expansive emptiness in my chest where the anxiety used to live. The knot was finally untied. The game was over. I turned back to the heavy oak door of the cottage. I slid a brand new key into the lock and turned it with a satisfying click. I knew that whatever came next, the healing, the future, the possibility of love would be a different story. It would be a story written by me, and it would never again involve the question, what are you going to do? Cry, thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to chat and share thoughts with you all. Make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.